My love life has become a horror story. It all began when I met this guy who was a baker. For years, I was dying just to talk to him. Even then, I was still obsessed. But one day, I finally got my chance to speak to him. I was so happy when he responded to me. Ooh, when I saw him at my front door with that cool gaze and that intimidating voice, I knew I wanted him by my side. Within a few weeks, we became girlfriend and boyfriend. He was that one guy who could exceed any girl's expectations. He was very in love with me, I must say. One day, my ex from a few years ago called me. I answered the phone just to be polite. I'm usually not one to be rude. Now, I did not want to jeopardize my relationship I had with my boyfriend, but my ex kept insisting and bugging and calling me, so I blocked him. Ugh, but every time he found a new way to keep calling and sending me DMs. After a few days, he ruined my relationship with my boyfriend. I really hated him for that. But out of nowhere, he did manage to get my attention once again. I really couldn't believe it. It was like a magic trick. However, my love for my actual boyfriend was much greater. Although, I don't know how my ex managed to get me interested in him again. One night, I had nightmares that I couldn't escape from a red room. There were horrible things all over the floor. I woke up and I couldn't get back to sleep. I told my mother about it, and she only said it was a bad dream. But these nightmares continued and went on and on. They grew more intense every time I ignored my ex-guy. And when I was with my real boyfriend, my body felt faint. The moment he held me, I felt claustrophobic. This was all getting much too heavy for me until I spoke to one of my aunts about it. She told me that if only I knew what somebody was doing to me, I would not believe it. I was shocked and I asked her why. She told me that my ex was crafting something against me, that most likely it was black magic. I didn't believe in those things. Maybe that's what's kept me intact from what he's trying to do. Later on, I was thinking about it. I remembered that I had given him some pictures of me and a jacket of mine too. So then I began to suspect a little more. My aunt and my mom told me that the love I felt for my boyfriend was stronger than the spell the other guy was putting on me. One night, my real boyfriend was here at my house. We were in the hallway when suddenly I heard a baby crying. I hugged him so tight when I saw a robed figure lurking in the dark corner of the hall. I immediately told him that I love him and to never let me go. I repeated it over and over again. I closed my eyes when I heard some blood-curdling screams. I held my boyfriend tighter and didn't let go. I repeated to him how much I loved him until all the screams died down. I will never let you go, my love, he told me in the exact moment that the terror ceased. When he went home, I was walking to my room and the phone rang. I answered and all I heard was heavy breathing. Just as I was hanging up, I heard a low voice telling me, "You and him are going to die." Then they hung up. I didn't pay any mind to it. I had to make sure that my boyfriend was okay. He was all right, and our relationship was good for a few months, until out of nowhere, he stopped talking to me. He totally ghosted me, so I begged and pleaded to him, but I couldn't do anything to convince him. Days went by and I understood what truly died was the love he had for me. When I no longer heard from my boyfriend, the other guy returned. He had a monstrous look on his face and he said, "Now you know how much I love you and that you should be with me, right?" But only my hatred for him grew even more. I was so desperate to get my boyfriend back that I said to myself, if it was black magic that separated us, then the same black magic can unite us again. I took my time deciding if I was really down for this, until finally one night I had the courage to gather all the things I needed to intertwine us. Just when the clock struck midnight, I got up and went to the bathroom. I turned on the light, grabbed a candle, and I lit it. I was scared, but at the same time, I really wanted my boyfriend back. So I began the ritual. Halfway through the spell, I heard something approach the door and start growling. I was so scared, but I kept on reciting what I was supposed to say. The more I spoke, the more mad this evil creature got and tried to open the door. More than anything, I want my boyfriend back, so I continued until I finished the binding spell. Suddenly, whatever was behind the door disappeared. I passed out in the bathroom and woke up the next day just listening to hear if anything has happened. Now that it was daylight, I went out to check the other side of my door and everything seemed fine. I hoped that he would come back, but when the indicated days of the spell were over, he was already with someone else. When I saw him, he looked happy. And the other guy was the same too. Even my ex was already chasing another girl. Now instead of being with my love, every night I have to deal with these evil growling sounds that maybe I invited myself. Most days I wake up with bruises and scratches. If this is the price I have to pay for my love to come back to me, then that's exactly what I'm prepared to do. This is not my story personally, but it did happen to my best friend. Here in Mexico, the neighbors on my block know it very well, from all the gossip, of course. I spoke with my friend Martha, and she gave me permission to share it with you. Martha has always been my good friend since we were little. The fact that we lived so close to each other, we became best friends. I should warn you though, this is a heavy story. It happened when Martha was 14 years old. She lived with her parents and her older sister Sophia. She was 24 years old. Sophia was a really pretty girl. She was also very nice. She was really easy to talk to and you can have the most interesting conversations with her. Sophia got a job at a factory. Even though it wasn't her ideal employment, she didn't mind it. In fact, over time she started liking it. She began to like it because there she met a handsome guy that was older than her. He already had a daughter and lived with his wife. That didn't stop Sophia from getting hooked on this guy, and she started flirting with him. But the guy was always honest with her. He respected his wife and was not going to fall into any temptation. His confession only drove Sophia to become more and more obsessed with him. She got the notion in her head that he would pay attention to her if only he didn't have a family. With this idea is how everything began. Sophia started cursing and wishing bad things to that guy's family. Although she begged him, he could not be swayed. He never changed his position and stayed faithful to his wife. Sophia had to do something else. She resorted to stronger things, spells, incantations, candles, and the like. So a few months went by like this. Sophia's parents got worried about her. They took her to therapy. All these things she was doing were not healthy, but the therapy was useless. Nothing changed. On the contrary, Sophia's desire got even stronger. She got deeper into witchcraft. Martha made a horrifying discovery in her sister's room. She found Ouija boards, candles, dolls, photographs, jars with mysterious liquids, and demonic idols, all in Sophia's room. From this point on, she began to sense a heavy atmosphere in her house. When I used to go visit Martha, I could also feel the heaviness. It was suffocating. I had trouble breathing and it was way too hot. Even though their house was in the shade, it used to always stay cool in there. Sometime later, Sophia started getting sick. She didn't eat, she didn't sleep. She lost a drastic amount of weight and her complexion was always looked pale. Sophia didn't want to go outside anymore. Her stride was slow and her steps were heavy. Her parents again got really concerned. They took her to numerous hospitals where they ran dozens of tests. The diagnosis was always deemed a severe depression, and that was understandable, right? She was suffering from love. Then everything changed when Martha and her parents were awakened by horrific screams. The screams came from Sophia's bedroom in the wee hours of the morning. Sophia said she felt something in her stomach, something in her body that made her feel sick. Everyone was scared because they believed she suffered from a deadly disease or some unknown illness. Once in a while, Sophia woke up feeling okay and even wanted to go outside. That's when we would see her on the street with her face all thin, big dark circles under her eyes, walking really slow. My friend Martha no longer liked being at home. She always wanted to sit at the park or on some planter outside. She used to say that her house gives her the feeling that something evil is there. She felt like she was being watched. And her sister was no longer her sister. The illness had stripped Sophia of her personality, leaving only a shell of her former big sis. She never talked to her anymore. Whenever she tried, Sophia was always submerged in her thoughts, in her whispers. More than a year went by and Sophia was still the same. In fact, she got worse each day. Not to mention her parents and even Martha herself. Not one of them could sleep well. They had to take care of Sophia day and night. On a good day, during one of those rare outings, Sophia accompanied her mom to the farmer's market. They shopped around for some fresh fruits and veggies. They came across a stand where they sell herbs, candles, and spiritual stuff. The lady working in that booth took Sophia's mother by the hand, and she told her this: "Your daughter has something very bad attached to her. You must find a cure immediately so she could get better, or else that thing will grow stronger every day." Sophia's parents have already tried everything having to do with science and solved nothing. They figured they had nothing to lose by trying a spiritual remedy. For many days, they came and went. First, they went to the local marketplaces here in Mexico City. Then they went to spiritual healers that specialize in darker rituals. They went from the Mercado in Tepito all the way to Catemaco in Tijuana. All those days, Martha stayed with one of her aunts, who is also our neighbor. Martha came over daily to eat at my house. We spent months doing this. Sophia's parents traveled all the way to Cuba to find the best practitioners of Santeria, but it was always the same result, the same answers. They were told repeatedly that there was no cure for Sophia. She was already doomed, and the only thing left for them to do is wait. When Martha finally got to see Sophia, she told her that she regrets all the bad things she did. She said she did not want to die for him. Sophia asked for forgiveness and for them to pray for her. She attempted to take her own life more than 5 times, but she always failed. There was always something that stopped her or saved her. The whole family was devastated over this. Sophia didn't eat anymore, not because she didn't want to, because she couldn't. It was so unfortunate to see her in this condition. We all encouraged her, but it was no use. She only asked for forgiveness and cried. After 2 years, her condition worsened. It got so bleak that they called a priest to come give her the final blessing. This part of the story is the most disturbing and terrifying. Martha has a hard time talking about it, but she still remembers it all too well. The day the priest came over, Sophia was screaming. All of us neighbors could hear the screams. In our own house, my mom was praying so that the suffering of this poor girl would end. Meanwhile, at Martha's house, Sophia was screaming and her body writhing and twisting on the bed. The priest yelled for it to leave her alone. Sophia hit the priest and threw jars of holy water. She scratched her own legs, her stomach, and her own face. Sophia's mother asked the priest if her daughter was possessed, but he said no. What happened was that her soul was already lost. After more gut-wrenching screams, more scratches, and hallucinations, she cried out for them not to let them take her. And then she passed away. While waiting for the doctor and the funeral services, Martha says that Sophia's body still suffered from spasms. Her legs would raise and her arms change positions. They even doubted that she really died. They performed tests to rule anything out. After they confirmed that Sophia really was dead, they prepared her body for burial. When they attempted to close the casket, the movements of her body wouldn't allow it. The priest had to go again, and after praying for the salvation of her soul, they were finally able to close the coffin. Martha told me that she's 100% sure they had to break her limbs because her legs kept raising and wouldn't allow the coffin to close. Something very strange also happened at the wake. There were noises coming from the coffin, and it fell twice when the base of the stand gave out. All this happened as a result of that guy's arrival, the guy that Sophia became so obsessed over. I remember it well. My mom was so scared and she asked us to leave, so we left early, like many of the guests that were there. The rest of the days were not your normal rosaries. It was the type of prayer as if to ask for the salvation of Sophia's soul. After this, they said more prayers and cleansed the house. One of the spiritual healers said that Sophia made a strong pact with a very dark entity. When she did not fulfill her mission, she lost it all. She paid with her own life, with her soul. Months later, Martha and her family moved from that house. Now they are even closer to my house. The previous house is still abandoned. They still own it, but they won't dare rent it out. They swear that the atmosphere is still heavy, and Sophia has appeared to them several times. During the week of Easter, they cover the front door with blessed crosses made of palms. There's still people who won't dare walk by the front of that house. Currently, Martha is married with children of her own. Perhaps this is why she was able to get over all of this. Just like her parents, they were finally able to smile again after not being able to for so many years. And I hope you guys enjoyed the story, and like they say, don't mess with the unknown. What goes around comes around, but much stronger. I'm from the city of Querétaro, Mexico. I'm actually 18 years old now and I'm a student at the university. I was very happy when I was a little boy. I lived with my parents, but I didn't have any brothers or sisters. Given the situation, I was always spoiled. My story begins when my father got fired from his work and he was forced to find another job. By then I was 9 years old and things didn't seem like they were getting any better. Since my dad couldn't find a job, my mother's salary was not enough to make ends meet. Later one day, my dad was offered a job in the town where we're originally from. It was a position at a prestigious office in that city, and we thought we could finally get back on our feet. But since my father started working there, the problems began with our family. My mother complained because my dad came home late from work and other things like that. Back then, I didn't understand what was going on, but I knew something wasn't right. This was true even though I loved my father very much. He had a reputation of being a womanizer. Although I could never say nothing to my mother, until one day they had an argument and I went to a party with my father. He brought an 18-year-old girl to the party. My dad asked me not to mention any of this to my mother. Without any reproach, I agreed and I became his confidant, even though I didn't get it at the time. But a few months later, I understood when my dad left us to go be with that girl. During that time, strange things began to happen. At night, we could hear footsteps in the kitchen. Some of our things were always moved from their place, but the worst was my mom's health that was also affected for no apparent reason. Within a year, my father's demeanor changed. He turned into a mean jerk and no longer had time to see me. At home, the unexplainable things escalated. Not only did we hear noises, but my mom had recurring nightmares. She saw a man that wanted to harm us, and it seemed like someone wanted to see us in ruins. And that's exactly what it was. My mom got sick of this, so she sought out the help of a priest. He told her that surely someone from our house did some witchcraft, and he offered to bless it himself. 2 months passed by and things were normal, until one night my father appeared at our front door. He was drunk, angry, and he wanted to beat somebody. Desperate, I went out to see what was going on, but when I opened the door, nobody was there. The only thing I saw was a huge black bird that peeked out from the shadows. This thing was mocking us in a very human-like manner. It was quite sinister. My mother grew desperate from all the expenses. She was wondering if there was any solution, so she consulted with a tarot card reader. When she first saw us, she cried out of fear. She told us that my father's lover, who was now his wife, not only wanted to see us in misery, but also wanted us dead. She wanted my father to focus on giving everything to her. She also explained that the other woman and her family are witches. For that reason, they made my father abandon us, and if that wasn't enough, they cast death onto us sooner or later. That explained the reason why my mother and I dreamt about that man. The psychic medium recommended a very good witch doctor. He was the one who helped us just in time. Thanks to him, we managed to get ahead. We moved to another city and it seemed like the trouble was over, but that was not the case. After 5 years of peace, I had dreams again and started feeling awful. I dreamt of my maternal great-grandmother, even though I never got to meet her. She warned me about a future tragedy. When I visited my father, I could feel a heavy tension in the air. My dad's wife hated me, and she never let me get near the daughter she had. She said I might do something bad to her. After a while, my father was sinking into alcohol. until he died in a car accident on November 1st. Oddly enough, just a week before his death, I dreamt about that same evil man. He made fun of me, saying that he was going to take my father. After the funeral, the novena is held as is customary. During those 9 days, there was a presence that kept interrupting the rosary. Sounds of wailful crying and growling could be heard, to such a degree that on the final day of the novena, the whole pot of tamales blew up. At the same time, the ceiling creaked frightfully loud. We heard a voice say, "There's no use fighting because he's already mine." That made my blood turn to ice because that was the same voice of the man from my nightmares. My paternal grandmother and I sought help since the paranormal activity did not stop in her house. The witch doctor who helped my mother, he told us long ago that the man we saw was the devil. He said the other woman made an offering directly in exchange for my father's life insurance. But unfortunately, by that time, he said he couldn't help us. We sought a priest whom he recommended. Even though he was retired, he was a good man. He told us it was not easy to save my father's soul because the way he died was sinful. For some time, he prayed for my dad's soul, and my family held masses for him to rest in peace. Luckily, it had some positive effects. Somehow, we were able to rid those evil women from our lives. Also, strange things stopped happening in our house, but I don't know if my father ever got salvation or not. Now, 5 years after his death, I still remember all the bad experiences I lived through. Not a single day goes by that I don't reminisce on the beautiful moments we had before witchcraft crossed our lives.